Good evening and welcome to the My Horse University and Extension's Horse Quest live webcast on the Foaling Mare preparations and process. The presenter today is Dr. Kathy Anderson. Kathy has been the Extension Horse Specialist at the University of Nebraska since 1991. She oversees the Youth and Adult Extension Horse Program as well as teaches undergraduate courses in the Animal Science Department. Kathy currently teaches courses in horse management, equine reproduction, and equine nutrition. Additionally, she has coached the University of Nebraska horse judging team. Please note that you are able to ask questions during the presentation tonight via the text chat at the bottom of your screen. The questions will be answered by Dr. Christine Skelly, who is an associate professor in the Department of Animal Science at Michigan State University. There will also be time at the end of the presentation for additional questions. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over here to Dr. Kathy Anderson.
Well, good evening to everyone, and I'm so glad that there's so many of you that are on. I know we have folks from a variety of different areas, and here in Nebraska it's suddenly decided to turn very, very cold. So what we'll go ahead and jump into is our presentation about what I was going to go through this evening as far as getting ready for the mare when she's about ready to foal and some things to look for, and to help, if some of you do have mares that are foaling that are fairly new to it, to ease some of the nervousness and tensions that you might have, to make you a little bit better prepared to expect what's going to go on. So early on, you'll probably will want to do some early vaccinations. Most practitioners recommend that you do a mare's annual vaccinations about 4 to 6 weeks before she's due to foal. And it's best really to check with your local veterinarian for your particular area as far as what you should be vaccinating her for. Most commonly this would be your standard routine things you would do in the spring, such as sleeping sickness, tetanus, influenza, potentially West Nile, and those types of things. So that's something you really want to do about 4 to 6 weeks before she's due to foal. Additionally, you really need to go and look to see if a mare has a calyx in her. And what a calyx is if that mare has been sutured from below her anus here down to just above where she would be urinating out from. It's a standard procedure for some breeding farms. If you've purchased a mare that was in foal, it's a good idea to check to see if she has a calyx. And if you just slip your finger in and along this line here, it should be open. And if it's been sutured shut, then she does have a calyx in her. You do want to have that opened up by either yourself or your veterinarian, and they basically will just cut this area open here. Because if not, this has formed a seal, and if that mare should try to deliver that foal with the calyx still in her, she's going to tear. It's not going to hold the foal in. It might tear along the line here. It might tear off to the side. Very serious. It could be a tear out through a rectal vaginal wall. And so those are all things that you do want to avoid. So it's a good idea about a month before she's due to foal to check to see if this area is sealed shut, and then be sure that you do have it opened. Another thing that you're going to want to do is to go ahead and determine where you want to go ahead and foal that mare out at. Or before that, we'll come back to the foaling location in just a minute. Here's some time frames that you should be aware of. The average gestation length for our mares is basically 335 to 340 days. They typically be a range of somewhere between 320 and 370 days. Okay. A premature foal is one that's said to be a mare foaling less than 326 days of gestation, and if she foals before 310 days of gestation, that foal is really not going to survive. That's considered aborted. Depending on your situation, sometimes you can get foals that are born prematurely to live. It can be very difficult. It can be very costly. And so those are just some things you need to be aware of. So if you know when your mare was bred, you can estimate when she is due to foal. All right? When I was foaling a lot of mares out, we typically would estimate those mares to foal at about 11 months. Now this always gave us a good estimate, and we typically would be watching those mares and monitoring them a little bit ahead of when they were due to foal. If you figure from the time that mare was bred to 11 and a half months, will come out a little bit closer. However, depending on the time of the year, some mares that are foaling in the late summer will have a slightly shorter gestation length than if they're foaling earlier in the year. So I always said we would calculate them at 11 months, and if we're watching them a little bit early, then that helped us avoid some mares foaling in places and things that maybe we really didn't want to. So that's just a little bit of a rule of thumb that you can look at to make some estimates of when that mare should be foaling. Okay, now back to the foaling location. Folks will foal mares out in a variety of different locations. It really should be an area that's quiet, something that's safe for both the mare and foal, and that she can get away from other horses. Many folks will foal mares inside, as this mare is, in a nice straw stall. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be out on grass. It can be the bedding that you do want to use is straw. You really want to avoid the dirt or a muddy type of area. Okay, some people that have great big pastures here in Nebraska, we've got some very large areas, some very big farms that have big pastures, and many of our mares in Nebraska, unless they've been stimulated to foal early in the year, will be foaling sometime in March in early area. So you can foal mares out on pasture if they're in a good grassy area, if it's a large enough area that they can get away from many of the other horses. This picture here is a mare that was out in our Sandhills regions, and these pastures are several hundred acres in size, and so they will typically be out there with a band of mares. They'll drift off and go foal and then come back the next day with their foal. However, if you don't have that type of area, we really want to keep them away where they can get away from some of the other horses. A shelter is handy depending on the time of year that they would be foaling. They can foal in some small enclosures. This is a small lot over here that's probably not the best situation. I know the picture's a little difficult to see, but these actually were some yearlings that were in the same pen with some mares and foals. And horses can get a little bit odd when mares foal. And so sometimes you'll have a mare that's either open or hasn't delivered her foal yet and get all excited acting and actually go up and try to steal the foal that's just been born from a newborn foal. And so we really try to avoid smaller areas such as this and get those mares out to a bigger kind of place if they have to be with other horses. Even better, even if you don't have an inside place, would be even a small pen like this where the mare could foal away from everyone else, be able to foal by herself. A negative of this pen is that you can see it's somewhat open at the bottom, and we did have an instance when I was foaling mares out while at Kansas State where it was kind of a pipe pen. There are a few cables here. The mare actually delivered the foal, and the foal came out on the opposite side of the pen, and that really was not a very good situation. And so if this is your area where you're going to foal several mares, you might actually take some wood planks and close in the very bottom so you don't have some of those types of things that might occur. So again, try to have them in a place that is quiet and away from everyone else. If you're foaling them in a stall, really the preferred type of bedding is going to be straw. It's going to be cleaner. It will be larger in particle size. We actually had a bad situation one time where a mare foaled on shavings, and the small particles of the shavings got up underneath the eyelid of that foal, and he had a corneal ulcer when he was just a day of age. And so really straw is kind of the preferred bedding to actually foal those mares out on. And then yes, we know straw does get fairly damp and wet, and so we usually will take and add shavings, slowly pull out the straw as it gets soiled and add shavings back into that stall over the next couple of days. When you're foaling in a stall, make sure you have good ventilation. However, it's not overly drafty, especially if you're foaling in a time of year when it's still relatively cold outside. Again, the quiet and private is really pretty important. Mares like to foal or will sometimes slow down the foaling process if they were bothered quite a bit. So if it's in a stall and you want to try to observe that mare, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and leave a light on so you don't have to make that change when you come into the barn. Some people will have their foaling stall where there's a window so they can actually peek into the mare when to see if she's getting close to foaling. And so some of those types of things where you can keep that mare as quiet and private, she's going to probably go ahead and deliver that foal a little bit, be a little bit happier, more conducive when she goes to deliver that foal. All right, some things to start to watch for as she begins to approach parturition, and some mares will go through all of these things, some mares will not. The group of mares that you really need to be careful of and pay attention of are the maiden mares. These are mares that are going to be delivering their very first foal. Some of them will go through all of these signs as far as getting a good udder development. Some will not do any of them, and so you really need to watch your calendar on those maiden mares and make sure that you're aware of when she's due to foal and watch her fairly carefully. But for most mares, about 2 to 6 weeks before she's due to foal, she'll start to get some mammary development here in her udder. All right, this is one that's getting some early mammary development. You can still see that her bag is just beginning to start to fill with fluid, and this can happen relatively early on. Then, usually within the next week to 2 weeks, as she gets closer to foaling, if you look up in her pelvic region here, as you can see on this mare, or in this diagram here, she'll begin to get soft and spongy. You can actually push your hand in here and it will get very, very soft, very, very flaccid. All right. Everything's preparing that mare for foaling, and so it will get very, very soft here. In addition, her vulva will usually look somewhat swollen, will get large and quite relaxed. As she's even closer to foaling, you can see this mare's udder here is very, very large. All right, it will get quite full for most mares. The teats will get distended out, and there will actually be, you can see fluid will fill down actually all the way into the teats. All right. Some mares, they might just go to standing around, and some of this might just be edema. So sometimes if you take them and walk them, put them on a hot walker or take them on a walk, some of this edema will go ahead and go down, especially if you see that they stock up, get swelling up in their legs. Those are some things that you want to avoid, and sometimes in this time that those mares are just getting very big, very heavy, very uncomfortable, and they don't move around as much as they might normally. And so some of those things to try to reduce some of that swelling will just help make those mares a little bit more comfortable. All right, as she's even closer, something else to notice about her udder is if you see these little particles here on the end of her udder, that is what we call waxing. And some mares will do this, all of them will not. Basically what waxing is the udder has filled with milk and it's pushing a little bit of that out into her teats, and you can see some pellets sometimes come out to the end. All right, and that's perfectly normal, but again, don't think every single mare is going to do that. The nice thing with the mares is they're usually relatively consistent within themselves, so if she typically waxes, you know that you can watch for that as a sign that she's only about a day or two away from foaling. The thing that you do want to avoid is some of these mares will actually begin to stream milk and fluid down their legs. The bags will get so full and pressure so much that actually they will begin to drop milk down their legs. All right. This is something you do want to avoid because the mare, her first milk is called colostrum, as you can see down here, and colostrum will be yellowish and somewhat sticky. A mare will only make one batch of colostrum per pregnancy, and so if she's already streamed all this colostrum down her legs, there's not going to be anything left for that foal to nurse when he is delivered. You like to predict the future, but we cannot always do that, and so we might think that she's going to foal tonight, but some mares I've known have actually waited a few more days, and then all the colostrum streamed down their legs, and then the mare owner needed to find an additional source of colostrum. Colostrum contains those early antibodies that those foals need for that early disease protection. And so if this mare does begin to stream colostrum down her legs, it's a good idea to go ahead and milk her some and save some of that either in the refrigerator or the freezer in case she goes several days without foaling. Then you still do have some colostrum to take care of that foal when he is first born. All right. We also have relaxation of the vulva, and this too is going to get even more pronounced as that mare is very, very close to parturition. Now, just remember that these are the things that are very normal for most mares, and just remember some mares don't go through all these stages, and even your maiden mares might be a little bit different. Now, there are a few things on the market that a mare owner can use to help predict when that mare is closest to foaling. One kit, and we did use some of these when I was at Kansas State, is called Predictofol. And basically what Predictofol does is it measures the changes in the calcium content within the secretion's inner udder. It's a very simple test to do. Basically what you do is you'll milk out just a very small amount of fluid from that mare and put it in a tube and dilute it down, and then you run through, it's a piece of paper that goes in there, goes into the sample very much like a litmus test. And basically it's measuring the number of color changes, the number of zones that change. And if you look at that sample and only 1 to 2 zones have changed, only one out of the 5 zones have changed, then there's less than a 1% chance that that mare is going to foal within, this should be 12 hours. If 4 of the 5 zones have changed, then there's an 8% chance that this should be an 80% chance that the mare is going to foal within 12 hours. And so that has been a very reliable test to tell you if that mare is real close to foaling. Foal Watch is another one that is somewhat similar. It again measures the calcium changes and looks with the calcium carbonate. With the sample, with what it measures, if the levels are 200 parts per million, then there's a 99% chance that she's not going to foal within 24 hours. If the levels are above 200 parts per million, then there's a very high probability that she's going to foal within the next 72 hours. So these are not going to tell you absolutes, but they do help give you an idea how close that mare is to foaling. If you get more experienced, with foaling out mares, you can do some of this on your own, where you simply go and just take 1 or 2 squirts out of that mare's udder, and then you can measure. You can simply look down in your hand, and if her milk has come in, if it is turned white, then you know that that mare her secretions have turned to milk, and she is very close to foaling. So that's something that a person can do as they get more experienced. There are some other foaling predictors, and you will see several farms use some of these. One is called a foaling alarm. It's very simple. Equipage is the type of system. Basically, we used one of these last year, and it did work quite well. There is a signal, a transducer, or a device that actually is placed on the horse's halter, and basically it just measures, or it sends off a signal to an alarm when that mare lays down, when she goes off in the prone position off to her side, and will send a signal off to the alarm that you can have in the house. It can also be programmed in various ways. Another one that you'll find at many breeding farms is the Foal Alert system. And the Foal Alert system basically has some transmitters that are sutured into the lips of the vulva, and then it's got an auto dialer that actually is set up now to call your cell phone. And so this is the type of system that's used for a variety of places. You can see it is a little bit more expensive than the previous system of a little over $1,000. There are different types of transmitters that can be purchased, some that are single use and some that are multiple use. And so that is another alert that is very popular. What the Foal Alert does is, because it's sutured to the lips of the vulva, when the foal begins to be presented and those lips of her vulva open up, that's when it sends the alarm. And now most of them are set to call your cell phone or call a telephone to wake you up. And it can be set to call multiple phones, and that's what many places will use. All right. To go through some of the various stages that the mare will go through, excuse me. Stage 1 is basically when she's having a lot of strong uterine contractions. Okay, she's going to basically act nervous. She will act somewhat colicky. She might look at her flanks. She might stand up and down. Sometimes they'll urinate quite often, or act like they're going to urinate and not really urinate. They will switch their tail. Some will push back and actually scratch their rear, like on the wall or on the fence. And these are all things where she's going through some early contractions. All right, this can last 12 to 18 hours. The contractions will increase in intensity and increase in frequency. If you checked her, the cervix is dilating. Many times they'll get up and down, and this is really thought that she is basically positioning the foal to where he needs to be. It needs to be for proper delivery. As we said, this can last 12 to 18 hours. This is the one stage that mares actually at times can start and stop. And if you peek in at those mares and you disturb them, then some of these mares will actually go ahead and stop. Okay. We had a situation, I always like to tell our story of our situation at Kansas State, where we had students to come watch the mares, and if they would disturb them, those mares would come, and they would even stop for short periods of time. Okay. And we had a lot of mares that were actually full in the middle of the morning because that's when the students were no longer there. And so keeping quiet without disrupting them in that will oftentimes help those mares go ahead and deliver. We do see many mares that do deliver in the evening, and it's primarily thought because it's quiet. If you have a mare that's really close and she doesn't clean up her grain, some of those things, those are also other indicators that she's very, very close to foaling. Then we move into stage 2, and in stage 2 is when the water will actually break. Once she gets into this stage, there's no turning back. She's going to go ahead and move forward and actually deliver that foal. So we'll show you some various pictures of this, but this is when the water breaks. Now don't think you're always going to see the water break, and don't think you're always going to see the water bag come out. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you do not. This is when she's having those strong uterine contractions. Actual expulsion of the fetus takes place during this time, and you have to realize that you should have a foal delivered within 20 to 30 minutes after that water breaks. So if you're around and you see that mare with the water broken and those types of things, I always recommend that you check your watch so you know what time it is when all of this is starting, so you have a good idea if things are progressing relatively normally. So here's a series of diagrams. This is a very good example of a mare with her water is broken. Okay, and to back up just a little bit on our preparations, in this farm they went ahead and they do wrap the tail on all of these mares, and that's probably a good practice. Mares full out on the pasture all the time without their tails wrapped, so don't think it's an absolute requirement, but that's not a bad idea if she is inside and you have access and are able to do that. But you can see this is a very good example of the water bag that's coming out, and once you see this, you really need to check your watch and make sure that you know about what time all of this starts, and within 20 or 30 minutes you should have the foal that's actually come out. Alright, here you can see another bit of a foot here. Here you can see the normal presentation, and you might be alarmed that these mares are standing and this mare is even munching, but that is very, very normal. They will get up and down, and hopefully most of them, once they get into very hard labor with that foal coming out, they'll stay down, but sometimes even then they still do get up and down. We actually one time delivered a mare that never even laid down. She stood up the entire time, and we were there, and we kind of helped the foal come out there at the end and laid him down so he didn't just crash on the ground. This is a presentation that you do like to see up here. You will typically have one foot ahead of the other, and they should be positioned, and I'll show you a diagram of a normal presentation where it looks like they're diving out and the foot is down. Alright, and that's what you look for. Here's some more as parturition has proceeded. This is the foal that has just come out. You can see the sac is still on him on this foal over here. You can see he's broken through the sac. And at this stage, this has been a very normal delivery. It's very important that you leave the mare and foal alone. You can't see it here, but the umbilical cord is still attached to the foal. And it is very, very important that you leave them alone so that that last blood is transferred from the mare to the foal. If the umbilical cord breaks prematurely, you can have problems of what we coin a dummy foal, and some problems such as that. And so this last blood that's pumped between mare and foal is really, really very important. I'd say over 90% of the time when that mare is ready to get up, then that's when that cord will go ahead and break, and so you really don't need to get in there and intervene unless for some unknown reason that mare is down for an excessive amount of time. Okay, some more pictures of a normal parturition, and these are all normal things that will go on. Once the mare is ready to get up, you can see she still has her placenta in her. She's gone ahead and gotten up, and this is a very important time for you to let the mare and foal bond. You can see this mare has started to clean this foal and nuzzling him and working all over him, and we'll just kind of stand back and be bystanders and let that normal bonding go on. There is information out there about imprint training, and what a mare owner has to understand and realize is that the foal needs to bond onto the mare, because that's who he needs to follow, that's who he needs to nurse off of, and those types of things. And so imprint training is a very good thing, but you need to let that mare and foal go ahead and bond initially before you get in and do some of those other types of things. There's a question down here about what effects of failing to let the blood into the foal or a dummy foal. Sometimes those are short-term types of things. Oftentimes they can be very difficult to get those foals to go ahead and nurse. When they get up, they're somewhat lost. They looked a little bit drugged, you might say, or a little bit drunk. They'll wander around. They might suck on the walls and things like that. So oftentimes they are much more work to get them to go ahead and nurse. Most of the time they come out of it. Sometimes some of them still act just a little bit retarded for a longer period of time. So I hope that clears up your question on that. Okay, I mentioned some of this already before as far as the umbilical cord, that we really do not want to break it. Once the mare or foal stands, that cord will go ahead and break on its own. All right, and I mentioned the premature separation if it breaks a little bit too early. If you happen to be there, or if that mare falls inside, then what this person is doing is they are doctoring that navel or dipping that navel with a tincture of iodine. Usually we look for a 7% tincture of iodine. I've also heard of using a 2% novel sand solution. All this is doing is to help to cauterize, to close off that navel stump. Now certainly foals that are born on the pasture, you're probably not going to be there to do that. Just think though, them that are born out in the grass, they're born in a more natural environment, probably a cleaner environment than what they are born in a stall. And so really, it's really recommended to go ahead and dip that foal's navel in some iodine when you find it. If you're there that evening, that's best. If you're not there and don't find it until the next morning, then that's all right also. Okay, I was looking at a few of the questions down here. How long does the mare stay down after foaling? I don't have an exact time frame on that. I would say don't be surprised if they're down maybe for 10 minutes, maybe 15. And you can kind of see if she sits up kind of sternly and is just acting like she's resting, you're really not going to worry about things too much. What should I look for to know I have to do something with the umbilical cord? Really, you're not going to have to know too much other than to dip it with the iodine, because normally either the foal will start getting up or the mare will start getting up, and that's when it will go ahead and break off. A little bit on foaling assistance. A lot of folks want to get pretty excited and get in there and help. And we're very fortunate in the horse because dystocia or foaling difficulty is really not very normal. But just kind of use some good common sense and watch this. We don't really get in there, if some of you have ever helped cattle calve, we don't really get in there with calf pullers and things like that. If it's that bad of a situation, hopefully you've gotten your veterinarian already involved. In this situation, sometimes the hardest part you'll see is for the mare to get that foal past at his shoulders or at his hips. And so what these folks are doing is they're mainly going to be in here, and as that mare strains and pushes, they'll just put a little extra pressure, a little extra tug to help that foal go ahead and come out. Okay, the most you want to do is to go ahead and pull as that mare is pushing. This situation, I believe she is in there checking the foal, making sure that it is in the proper position, the proper And what you want to go in there and feel for, and I'll show you in a diagram here, is that you do have the 2 front feet and a nose. And if you're in that position, unless excessive time has gone on, you can go ahead and expect things are going to be proceeding quite normally. Okay, normal presentation, as you see here, when the foal is getting ready or being delivered, is, I always say they look like they're diving out. Okay, you'll have the 2 front feet here, one front foot is going to be a little ahead of the other, and then you'll have the nose. And so as that foal starts to come out, you will have one front foot. If you get a little nervous, stick your hand in there and just make sure the other foot is right behind him, because you'll have one front foot and she'll be straining, and then you should get the next front foot. And then as the nose comes out, you'll see she's getting the shoulders through the pelvis, and that can be a difficult time. Let's see. Here's some malpresentations that sometimes you run into, and again, it's not very common, but I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. This is one where if you only have a nose, you can be sure that pretty confident that you've got 2 front feet back. If time has been excessive, you really cannot wait on the horse. And so if you're real nervous, let your veterinarian know as early as you can. If you go in there and feel and you see this nose, you better call him right away, because in this situation you're going to need to push the foal back into the mare and try to get those legs straightened out. Here's another presentation here. Here both of them are coming, but you've got the back feet up. Okay. Here we've got the head down. This is a breech presentation. This is the head back. All right. So those are some different kinds of presentations that you really could run into, but again, they really are not that common. If you're concerned, if something doesn't seem right, you need to get your veterinarian on the phone right away to try to get them alerted, and they can start on their way, because things do need to proceed quite quickly. If any of you are involved with cattle, cattle can wait and go excessive amounts of times, but a horse cannot. All right, moving on with the 3rd stage, and this is after the foal has been delivered, the placenta should be expelled. And here we have the placenta. This is a mare that's still laying down, and the placenta should go ahead and be expelled within about 3 hours. And that's what we really look for. And this placenta here is looking very, very healthy. You can see it still is in the mare, but that is, you like to see a placenta that's healthy like that. We'll come back to problems with the placenta, but that's the basic time frame that you want to look into. Okay, so within those same first few hours, the foal does need to get up and does need to begin nursing. Now again, with foal nursing, a lot of folks will get very anxious and very nervous and sometimes do a little bit of too much assistance. Remember, we need this foal to bond to this mare. We don't need this foal to bond to you or to bond to the walls. And so provided the foal and the mare are up and the foal is looking, so this guy, he's sucking on her hind legs, here he's going between her front legs, you really don't get too concerned, all right? And here he's gone ahead and finally latched on. One thing you might want to do if the mare is kind of nervous is go ahead and just hold on to her. Sometimes we've held on to her. Sometimes we've even twitched her, particularly if you have a maiden mare, because she can be very nervous. She can be moving around. Her udder probably is very large and very sore. So sometimes when those foals first begin to nurse, it can be a little bit of a challenge. All right. Here, all we're doing here on this foal is, you can't see us, one is holding the mare, and he's more or less kind of just pointing that little guy in the right direction. You cannot take a hold of their head and stick them onto the udder. They're going to fight you. They're not going to nurse. You might go and put on your hand, pull out a little bit of the milk and rub it onto the mare's udder to help that foal find it. Some of those types of things. But you basically are going to have to position that foal in that right direction. Something else to notice is that if you take and scratch right up here on that tail head of that foal, that stimulates a sucking reaction. And so you can do some of that and stimulate that foal to go ahead and start trying to suckle, and then just kind of push him around to get him back there toward that mare, towards that mare's udder, and get him pointed in the correct direction. Okay. A little bit about some postpartum complications with the placenta. Okay, we want to make sure that all the placenta is coming out of the mare, and you can see this one is still attached and still in the mare. This is a placenta that had a piece torn out of it. It's important, once the placenta is out of the mare, to go ahead and look at it. Make sure it's a good healthy color like this one is. Make sure it doesn't appear that there are any torn pieces that might actually be left in the mare. If a piece is actually left in the mare, then that can set that mare up for some endometritis, some infectious types of things. And so it's important to try to look and make sure that all of the placenta has come out in one piece. A retained placenta is considered when that placenta has not come out within 4 hours after she's foaled. I'm not sure that we really know why a mare retains her placenta. Some routinely do it. It can be a kink in her uterus. We did have one mare that I used to foal out at Kansas State, and every year we knew that that mare was going to retain her placenta. Okay, so be there and make sure that it has come out. It's important not to pull that placenta out. Experienced foalers that have several foals will have some oxytocin that they can administer, but if you're not too familiar, your best bet is to go ahead and just call your veterinarian and get them to come out and assist you with getting that placenta out. Okay. Different things that may cause that retained placenta. If she had a difficult birth, if things did not proceed as normally, sometimes a severe placentitis, sometimes uterine inertia can cause it. Also, if unfortunately you lost that foal, the foal was not born, or the foal was born dead or whatever, and the mare did not experience the oxytocin that is released when the foal goes to nursing, those mares too sometimes can have more problems with the retained placenta. Okay. Why does it need to come out? It can cause some severe complications. It's an interesting dynamic, but mares that have had a retained placenta for an extreme amount of time can actually develop laminitis. They can develop a meningitis, septicemia, and even worse cases, it can cause them to die. So we do need to make sure that those placentas do get out. Probably the most common treatment for for a retained placenta is to administer oxytocin to the mare, generally 20 units intramuscularly, sometimes every 2 hours, is what is administered to those mares. As I mentioned before, experienced people that foal out several mares oftentimes will have oxytocin to administer themselves. In addition, if it's something that you're not comfortable with or not experienced, a simple call to your veterinarian will generally take care of that, and they'll be happy to come out and give oxytocin to those mares. If that doesn't work, they will also do a saline drip over several hours. Okay, you can see this mare, they've actually taken and tied the placenta into a knot. Another treatment sometime is to infuse that mare, where they will go in with a warm saline and infuse that into her uterus to go ahead and encourage that placenta to go ahead and come out. But it is very important also, even if you're experienced and you've given her a shot of oxytocin and you feel you need more intervention, to go ahead and call your veterinarian to get that kind of assistance. Okay, as far as normal uterine involution, as we said, normally the placenta is passed within 3 hours. The thing to realize is when a foal nurses, oxytocin is released, and that is what will stimulate uterine contractions and let that mare go ahead and pass her pass her placenta. So typically what you see happen is once that foal's up and once that foal starts to nurse, that mare does go ahead and drop her placenta. If you've got that foal up and he's been nursing and the placenta still doesn't come out and you're up to that 3 hours, then you probably really do need to get to some assistance. Okay, so how does that uterus normally go ahead and involute after parturition's occurred and after the placenta is out? Really within 2 days, just 2 days after she's delivered that foal, the uterine side has greatly decreased in size. Most of the fluid has been moved out of her uterus. In addition, within 3 to 5 days after she's foaled, really your veterinarian should be able to go in there and easily palpate those uterine horns because they've involuted that much. Then over the next 2 weeks, within 5 to 15 days postpartum, most of your mares will go ahead and come in to have what we call a foal heat. Okay, by day 7, the microcaruncles that were in there would no longer be evident, and by day 14, the uterus will still be somewhat enlarged, but it's getting more down to its normal size. I'm not going to go into very much detail as far as foal heat and postpartum breeding, but just to touch on it just a little bit, there is a lot of differences of opinion on foal heat, whether you should breed them on foal heat or not, but just realize that depends on the particular, depends on your situation, that if you choose to breed on foal heat or not. It does give you a predictable estrus, so you know that most of these mares are going to come in and have a heat roughly, or start estrus roughly 10 days after she is foaled. If she's had, okay, basically by day 9, after she's delivered that foal, about 43% of mares will come in and ovulate. However, by day 15 and day 20, nearly all mares usually have come in and ovulated. Mares that ovulate and you breed them after day 10 postpartum, they generally have a fairly normal pregnancy rate. If they come in and have an early foal heat, you can see these mares probably are not as good candidates to breed on foal heat if they have a foal heat that's a little bit later. We've got a question down here. Is there a certain breed that can have problems birthing more than others, as in conformation? You know, I really haven't read anything or heard of anything of any particular breeds or types of horses with more complications, more dystocia, more problems delivering foals than others. By and large, pretty much we think that they're pretty safe. And here, Christine, if you read, she's given you some more information as far as ponies and donkeys. One practice that many practitioners will go ahead and use is what we call a uterine lavage. That's going to help stimulate a mare's uterine involution. And by involution, what I mean is bringing that uterus back down to its normal size of what it should be prior, what it was prior to the time that she was actually pregnant. So we know that a uterine lavage is a good way to help stimulate that uterine involution to bring it back down to normal size. Anytime that mare has retained her placenta, it really is a good suggestion to go ahead and have a uterine lavage performed on that mare. Many times, for any reason, if they've had a delayed uterine involution, if it's not come back to normal size. Additionally, mares that have lost their foals, so they did not have that good stimulation of those mares nursing, probably also should have a uterine lavage performed on them. It's also a good treatment for endometritis. Basically, all that it does is it flushes out the uterus. A warm saline solution, you can see the bags here, are run into that mare, into the mare's uterus, and then actually gone ahead and pulled back out. And it's warm saline with a lactated ringer solution can be used, and it really does a nice job of flushing and cleaning that uterus out between the various debris and things that might have been in there after parturition. It is best if it's performed very soon after foaling. Probably just 2 days postpartum is when you're going to get the most advantage to it. For mares that were normal foaling, some have reported really no benefits of them. A lot of folks, if they're looking to breed on foal heat, though, will go ahead and look to have a uterine lavage performed on those mares. Here's another question we have as far as what is the best age to breed a mare the first time, and is there an age when a mare should be past breeding age? As far as the best age, we really don't like to breed mares before they're actually 3 years of age. 2-year-olds are quite young. Some folks will wait till they're 4. I think breeding them in the spring of their 3-year-old year to breed to they would be foaling as 4-year-olds. It's probably the youngest that you would want to do it. And as when they're past breeding age, Usually the mare tells you that herself. There have been some mares, many mares into their early 20s will go ahead and have foals. However, many times what begins to happen is their reproductive efficiency begins to decline. They don't cycle as well. They're very, very difficult to get in foal. And so many times those mares will let you know when they basically are done breeding. So that's kind of a bottom line that you can use. Just a few comments on inducing parturition. It's something that we really do avoid in horses. You need to have some very, very strong reasons to induce parturition, and most of your veterinarians will avoid it. Some of the things that need to be present if you're considering inducing parturition, she really needs to be very close to actually going ahead and getting ready to deliver that foal on her own. So it's really suggested that she's at least 330 days of gestation, that she does have substantial mammary development. So she does have her milk that has come in, and we really need to check and make sure that her colostrum is present. There is a device called a colostrometer that can go in, and a colostrometer that can go and take a sample of her mammary secretions and let you know the degree, the level of colostrum that is present. Also, her cervix needs to have already begun to dilate, and that foal needs to be in the position that I showed you, where he basically looks like he's diving out. So the 2 feet and the nose need to be easily palpated and easily felt. Again, most of the time we greatly avoid inducing parturition. There are different drug therapies and compounds that are given, and you really need to consult with a veterinarian, have them present, and have one that's been experienced in inducing parturition before you go through and have it done. Basically, that's kind of the primary things that we wanted to cover this evening, and I hope it gave you some good information as far as what to expect as a mare is getting close to foaling and what a normal process should go through. Remember, if you're not experienced, or even if you are, as your mare is getting close to foaling, you really need to have a veterinary phone number on hand, because if things start to go, if you start to get nervous and things are not going correctly, you really need to try to get a veterinarian there as quickly as possible to help you out. Again, we're fortunate. Problems in foaling mares are not very common, and so most of the time things go just as planned, and hopefully you can have a live foal, enjoy that foal, and move on from there. So with that, we'll stay on here for a bit more, see if you have any more questions. So go ahead and keep typing those in if you do. Someone asked, would it be a good idea to have a vet come out for your first foaling, even if it goes well? To me, that's a little bit of a conversation between you and your veterinarian. Some are real willing to do that, and if you certainly want them there, that's probably not a bad idea. And I would visit with your veterinarian, and you two come up with a plan of what you think is going to be the best, what's going to be best for the both of you. Oh, you want to know about your mare that had a 3rd-degree tear? again, that's pretty much a veterinarian question. You might want to have someone there to assist you to alleviate a full tear. Yeah, I can understand that you'd be somewhat concerned and somewhat nervous. Watching and monitoring him, maybe not being afraid to assist that mare just a little bit to try to make sure things come out as positive as they can. Again, consulting with your veterinarian might even be a pretty good idea, and I could certainly understand some nervousness in that situation.
Kathy, some of these questions came in kind of fast. There was one that kind of got pushed back a little bit. Question was, would a first foal from a maiden mare typically be smaller at birth?
Oh, about a first foal from a maiden mare. I think sometimes that they are. Some of that also, if it's a younger mare and maybe she's not at full capacity of her body size. A lot of folks, if you talk to them, that will say first foals from mares tend to be a little bit smaller than subsequent foals. It doesn't mean that they won't grow up, and be just as if same size and stuff as subsequent foals. And so I believe sometimes that you do run into that or see some of that.
Okay, once again, do we have any more questions from anyone? Okay, well, we would like to thank everyone for participating in today's web presentation. Our next webcast will be held on Tuesday, January 13th, 2009 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the topic of environmentally friendly horse management. And this webcast is actually the first in a three-part series on environmental issues in the horse industry that will be held in January, February, and March. There's one web presentation each month. The January presentation will be held by Jennifer Nadeau of the University of Connecticut. For more information, please visit our website at www.myhorseuniversity.com. And please feel free to send us any comments and suggestions to info@myhorseuniversity.com. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone, and also I'd like to thank Dr. Anderson for your time as well, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Oh, how much more difficult is it for a maiden mare to get in foal via artificial insemination? I don't think it's probably any more difficult. Some folks might feel it's a little bit easier or maybe a little bit better because they might be watching her and monitoring her more as they're trying to get her bred. And so really, as far as reproductive efficiency and pregnancy rates of breeding by artificial insemination versus others, I really don't think that there's much difference. And she's 13 years old. I don't think that's getting up there really too old. Sometimes folks will be concerned about the age of a maiden mare, as they start to age some. I'm not sure you're going to want to wait a whole lot longer, but if she's a mare that does cycle relatively normally and those types of things, your chances of getting her pregnant by AI versus live cover probably are not much different. Well, if you can't tell if when she cycles, you either need to get in a situation where she can be teased, or a veterinarian to come out and palpate her and check her periodically to try to tell and see when she cycles. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge. I don't know if you have geldings around or you've ever tried to tease her. Naturally, some mares show heat much better than others. And so if you need some help with that type of thing, generally your veterinarian can set up over the course of a couple of weeks to palpate her and check her about every 3 or 4 days to try to see see that she's coming into heat for you. And then once he catches her and gets her to come into heat, then you can you can follow her cycle a little bit more. So that first time you might have to have her checked a bit more often. Then you kind of know about where where her cycle is and be able to follow her. Okay, any more questions? And if not, well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap her up.
Okay, I think we're all set. Once again, everybody have a wonderful evening, and for those of you like us here in Michigan and Iowa and that are really cold, everyone try and stay warm. Have a great evening.